Well, it shows 8:30, so I'd like to call the Planning and Stakeholders Relation Committee to order. I wanted to also mention this meeting is being recorded, and to please mute your microphones when you're not speaking. Thank you. First item on the agenda is the roll call. It's a roll call of my committee, I take it. And of course, John Tagg. Is there anybody else from my committee on the call?
Ann O'Gorick is here.
Hi, Ann.
Hi.
I was looking on the list to see if there was anybody else from the committee on there. Okay, I guess Ann and I are the committee members on. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the March 18th minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Are there any corrections to those minutes, Ann?
No.
Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, next is going to be a general planning update from David Huffaker and Amy Silberman. So David, are you going to kick this off?
I will kick it off briefly. Good morning, Committee Chair Tagg and members of the board. I'm David Huffaker, the Chief Development Officer, and we're going to go through a few different items that are going on in the planning world. Just to give you an update, we'll take advantage of a relatively light agenda. Amy Silberman and her team are going to walk you through a few updates for you, and I'll just turn it over to Amy now. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Good morning, board committee members. My name is Amy Silberman. I'm the Director of Planning and Service Development. I'm just going to go over a few brief updates this morning. One is that in a few weeks here, we have an upcoming June schedule changes planned on Sunday, June 20th. A few major changes for everyone's awareness this morning. One is the shortening of a route. So Port Authority buses are no longer permitted to lay over. That's what we do at the end of the route in Trafford, which is in just over the border in Westmoreland County, because we've not yet been able to identify an alternative location for our buses to do a layover out there. We will be shortening Route 69 for the June pick so that it does no longer comes all the way into downtown Pittsburgh. So it, on its inner end, will end at Wilkinsburg Station so that it can lay over there. Without that layover, the route becomes too long and untenuous for on-time performance reasons. So that also removes direct service not only for the Trafford community, but also Pitcairn, Wilmerding, Turtle Creek, and Forest Hills. We are continuing to work to identify a permanent layover location, an alternative to the old one. We haven't yet, but we'll continue to work towards that. We have added several trips to Route 67, which operates the same pathway in the city of Pittsburgh as the 69, so that the folks riding on that portion of the 69 route have a similar level of service so that we don't have overcrowding or anything in the city. So we'll continue to work to identify a longer term layover location and hopefully get that route returned to its normal routing in the near future. On a positive note,
Amy, yes,
Amy,
quick question. So you're saying that the route will still go from Trafford to Wilkinsburg. So if they go that route, they will have to transfer at Wilkinsburg. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So they would have to transfer to the P1 or the P3 if they're headed to Oakland or another route at Wilkinsburg Station.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And then on a positive note, we are finally able to add Sunday service to Route 4, Troy Hill. If you recall, last year we added weekend service as a new service standard to our local routes, but that route had some ongoing construction issues that made it difficult for us to warrant adding the weekend service. So we are doing that for the June pick. It will run about every hour, a little bit more than every hour, from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Sundays. Moving along, just some minor service updates for the June pick on the next slide. Thank you. So we have some downtown central business district routing changes. These are in response to some ongoing outdoor dining accommodations on Penn Avenue. So many of these routes have already been on this detour. We are just making the detour, building the detour into the schedule for the June pick. So there are several routes that are involved in that, but it should not be a major change to any of our riders, as these routes have already been temporarily detoured over the last year during the pandemic. Additionally, on the P2 route, which is a morning rush hour only route, sort of version of the P1, we are removing the downtown loop routing. So that means that the P2, which operates on the East Busway, will come inbound as far as Penn Station, which is the last station on the busway. And then it will turn around there. The reason for this is those of you who are P1 riders or who have ever ridden it before, it is by far and away our most challenging route with regard to bunching and overcrowding. And we are piloting this change as a way to understand several things. One has to do with running times and reliability and on-time performance, and another has to do with rider behavior and how riders respond, whether they choose instead to wait for a P1 or whether they hop off the P2 and hop on another route into town, or whether they just walk from Penn Station. So that route does not have a lot of trips. And there are a lot of P services in the morning for folks to hop on something else, including the P1, if they want to get all the way to, say, 6th and Smithfield Street at our super stop there. One very minor Oakland routing change that has also been ongoing, but we're making permanent with this schedule change, is the 81 and 83 routes, which were routed off of Bigelow Boulevard in the middle of Oakland during the reconstruction project that has been ongoing there. That project is now complete. We are permanently moving those two routes over to Belfield Avenue to align with our other transit routes that use Belfield. Several trips have been added on about 7 bus routes or so to continue to address crowding issues that were related to capacity constraints. One note here, of course, is that our scheduling takes place and the work behind scheduling takes place months in advance of doing the actual service changes. So at the time these trips were added, we did not know if and when our capacity restrictions would be lifted. Now that those restrictions are being lifted, we'll continue to monitor these trips that we are adding in June to see if they're still needed, or maybe we'll be able to pull them back out, but we'll wait and see how riders respond to using those added trips. And then finally, just some minor schedule adjustments to continue to update things like running times for on-time performance on 10 or so routes.
Hey, Amy.
And then
Amy,
yes.
I just had a quick question on the downtown loop ones that you moved off of Penn Avenue. Where are they operating now? I don't use those routes, so I don't really know. And is it working?
Yeah, there are 3 different route groups. So going over each of them in detail is probably a bit too complicated to do right in this moment, but generally some of them have been using Fort Duquesne and some of them have been using Stanwix and having sort of a shorter downtown loop that doesn't come all the way down Liberty Avenue and then back down Penn. But we do have all of those on the website and ready to go from a communications perspective to make sure that folks know where those permanent changes are if they haven't been riding during the pandemic, so that if they say return over the summer to riding again, they know where their routes are.
Okay, thank you.
But the P1 route's not changing at all, right? It's what it is, right?
Correct. The P1 is not changing at all. The P2 change is, the P2 is sort of a version of the P1, and so it's a good sort of test bed for us to pilot some things without significantly affecting riders.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
Yep. And then one last piece from the scheduling and service planning side of things is that, as I'm sure everyone can imagine, we have been spending a lot of time and staff effort focusing on ridership changes as a result of the pandemic. We anticipate that need to be even greater through the fall and winter of this upcoming year as people return to some sense of normalcy. And so we are devoting all of our scheduling and service planning staff time to continuing to watch ridership and continuing to plan changes to trips that are a result from our sort of post-pandemic world. For that reason, we are not going to, what is a significant amount of staff time, spend the time this fall to do our formal service request evaluation process. We will pick it back up in the future, but it does take a lot of time, and we really need to devote staff time over the next 6 months to making sure that we're responding to ridership changes as people return to work, for those who have not been physically at their work locations for the last year.
Just a question on we're increasing capacity now on our vehicles, right? And I don't know, was it, and I can't remember the article, whether it was, whether we have a time frame to go back to full service, or is that like we're looking at September? I'm not sure. Can you comment on that or not?
Sure. I don't have great answers to that yet, because we're watching it sort of day to day right now, and we're also trying to guess what people are going to do in September and talk to some of our partners and organizations to guess what their employees are going to be doing. I will say we're at about 94% of our pre-pandemic service levels right now, and we are hoping to bring that back up in September to accommodate at least a significant portion of folks likely returning to work, but we don't have exact answers for exactly what routes those are, exactly what levels of service will be put back, et cetera. David, did you want to add anything to that?
Thanks, Amy. I was just going to add, Mr. Tague, that we will be returning much of our service in September, but I think one of the key messages of the pandemic is we're not going to be running exactly what we ran 2 years ago. And so it gives us an opportunity to allocate resources to those areas where they're most needed and to provide those essential connections. We are closely watching what's happening in the downtown business environment. I get information fairly regularly from Allegheny Conference and the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership as they reach out to their constituents to hear what's happening. And one thing that's very clear is not everyone is going to be coming back to the office 5 days a week in downtown Pittsburgh. So we are kind of anticipating a nice spike in the fall, and we will be restoring quite a bit of commuter service to the extent that the specifics of which routes and which times, we don't have that information yet. We're watching the data, and we will continue to monitor trends, and as we hear of development, then hopefully we'll be as flexible as possible to add service. But one of the things that we'll be trying to do, I believe, will be trying to maintain a few extra buses available for surges as they're identified. So we may not have every single trip planned, but we'll have what on our extra board have the ability to respond to where there might be individual spikes in ridership that we hadn't anticipated, so that we can address that.
Thank you, David.
All right, and then finally, just a few upcoming dates on the next slide for planning projects. We just recently had a kickoff meeting for our South Hills Junction Station area planning process. So if anyone who was not able to make that meeting, the project information is on our website now, and you can learn how to get involved so that you can be sure to make it to our next meeting. And then next week, our long range plan, Next Transit, has public meetings to start looking at the priority project and program lists that are coming out of that process. So I encourage everyone to tune in to one of our 3 public meetings. They will be online to hear more about what you're seeing on screen here in terms of the map and what we're looking at over the next 25 years. So there's 2 on Monday, 1 at 10 and 1 at 1:30, and then 1 on Tuesday evening at 5:30. The website for that is nexttransit.network, and the call-in number is 855-925-2801, code 4581, for folks who do not have online access but would like to listen in via phone. And with that, I'm happy to answer any final questions on the service updates or upcoming meetings.
I just had a question on with the Next Transit. In other words, there's the preliminary project is there going to be additional meetings beyond that, or I'm not sure when the next transit will be completed?
Yes, so tentatively right now we are anticipating putting out the draft plan in July and having a round of public meetings both online and hopefully in person or open house type or potentially outside events where folks can learn more information. And assuming that everyone is on board with the plan, our hope is to present the plan formally to the Port Authority Board in September. So we will plan to do a presentation here at Planning and Stakeholder Relations in either June and or July to give you a bit more information about what this map, for example, is showing. But we want to make sure before we do sort of a formal presentation, this current round of public meetings is sort of a list of which projects are most important for us to start next. And we want to make sure that that list is in the right order before we sort of formally present a draft plan with draft projects.
Thank you, Amy. Ann, do you have any questions of Amy? Any additional questions?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay, any board members have any questions of Amy or David?
No,
Seeing
just
none,
thank you.
are there any stakeholders on the call that would like to ask Amy or David questions? Okay, seeing no additional questions, thank you, David and Amy, for your presentation. And do I have a motion?
We do actually have one more quick thing that we incorporated into these brief updates this morning. If you don't mind me passing this along, I'm going to pass it along to Ellie Newman, who's our section manager of service development, who's just going to give you a preview of another data tool.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No worries. That was my fault.
You know, you can't escape getting even more presentations. So good morning, everyone. Good morning, members of the board. My name is Ellie Newman. I'm the section manager of service development, and I am going to be walking you through a new bus stop data tool that we're going to be releasing within the next week or so. Very excited about this. It's going to really improve our internal processes for responding to data requests and make it a lot easier for internal people and external people to look at bus stop usage in areas that they're interested in. So currently we do obviously have our system map where you can click on any individual stop and see how many people use it in the most recent year. But we really needed a tool that was more flexible for being able to show all the users on all the stops on a particular street or neighborhood, and being able to allow somebody to choose what time period they're interested in, what service day they're interested in, what route they're interested in, and really just kind of beef up what was available online. So we often receive requests for what is the total amount of stop ridership on Carson Street for September 2019, for example, and how does that compare to pandemic level ridership? And each time that we got one of those, they were always a bit different, and it could take about 30 minutes sometimes to gather what stop IDs they wanted and be able to summarize the data the way that they wanted to. So it was quite a time-consuming process. So here's a little snapshot of what the tool looks like now. So it's sort of like the system map on the left-hand side, and it's paired with a table on the right. And what this allows people to do is kind of draw a lasso around the stops that they're interested in. So this example is on the strip, and as soon as they close the loop, the table updates for them. So they can just kind of zoom to wherever they're interested in. They can select 1+ stops, and then it will just kind of populate the table with those stops that they care about. Next slide, please. The other thing that is really cool about this tool is that we have kind of preloaded it with data from different time periods. So if somebody wanted to see pandemic ridership versus pre-pandemic, they could look at that. If they want to see winter ridership versus summer ridership, they could look at that. So we'll be updating it with the most recent month of data every month. And you can also filter by what route you're interested in or what service day if you only care about Saturday or weekday, for example. Next slide, please. So the next piece of this is you can get summarized data. So the public version on our website will just kind of total the selected stops for you. So here we're looking at Ellsworth Avenue, and you can see there's a bolded total row on the table there that tells you what was the totals for the time period. Our internal users will be able to export this table directly to Excel. So this will be really useful for our internal departments that work a lot with stop data and might need to have a spreadsheet of stops that they can take and do whatever they need to. So this is obviously going to be a huge time saver for us. I think it's going to take us about 5 minutes to respond to these types of requests now, and normally it would take about 20 to 30 minutes. So it's going to be a great time saver and free us up to do more things. It's going to be great for internal and external people, I think. We've kind of demoed it for our friends at the city and at SPC, and they've been very excited about the possibility to do this because they've often kind of had the desire for a tool like this. And it should also be useful for many of our internal departments. So for example, if our special services team is planning a detour, they would be able to look at a street and see quickly how many people currently use these stops that might be affected by the detour. We plan to build out some other additions to it. So we're hoping to add light rail ridership. Currently it's just bus, and also be able to show trip counts by route so that you could quickly find out how often does a certain route come to this street, or what is the total number of trips that serves Oakland in a typical Saturday, for example. So it should be published within the next week or so, and it's going to be living on our open data page, which is portauthority.org/open data. So that's all I had. Let me know if you have any questions. Oh, John, I think you're muted.
No, my question had to do, there was some conversation, I'm trying to remember, was it on the Atwood call or not? I'm not sure about accessibility of the stops. Weren't you doing some work on that?
Yes, so I did recently present a tool that we're working on to crowdsource accessibility information. It's a different tool. We're hoping to release that fairly soon as well, but that would allow people to talk to us about their concerns with stops if they feel that the sidewalk is not wide enough or if there's some obstruction at the bus stop. So that would be a separate tool coming out.
Well, believe me, from my standpoint, I appreciate that very much. So thank you for the guys working on that issue. And do you have any questions of Ellie or Eleanor?
No, I just want to say this will be a great tool for county planning and for all of our municipal partners when they're doing their own comp planning efforts or active transportation plans. So yeah, this will be great to share with them.
Definitely. Thank you.
Any questions from other board members?
Hey, this is Jessica. I just want to say I'm here, but I don't have any questions.
Okay. Welcome, Jessica. Any questions of Ellie by stakeholders that are on the call? Now, before I call for a motion to adjourn, are we done with the agenda?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, meeting stands in adjournment until next month. Thank you very much for everybody joining, and thank you guys for your presentation.
Thank you. I'll just give it a second here as I pull up my agenda. Okay. I will call to order the Finance Committee for May 2021, and we'll take a roll call here to see if my members are here. So Board Member Liptak. Representative Davis.
He indicated he's not coming today, and he's gonna
Okay.
come.
All right. Board Member DeLon?
He also isn't able to make it today.
Okay. All right. I'm a one-woman show then, I guess.
Well, I'll stand.
Okay, so other board members that are present, could you please say your name?
Hi, Ann.
Jeff.
Michelle Smianik.
Thank you.
John Tagg.
Hello, Ann. This is Lori Misgorski.
Thank you.
Hey, Ann,
Jessica
Jen is
Wald.
on the phone. Not sure why we aren't able to hear her, but she is on. She's here and participating.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And this is Jessica Waldsville.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Approval of the minutes of the April 15th, 2021 Finance Committee. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
And a second?
Second, this is Michelle.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, our next agenda item is the FY 2022 Proposed Fare Policy Changes Status Update. Catherine Kellerman. Anybody there?
Well, she shows on the list, I guess.
All right,
Seems
tech
we're having some
people.
technical difficulties because
Yeah.
Jen's also muted by Teams. Not sure why. And I know Catherine, I'm not sure what her situation is.
They were all there a minute ago, so I don't know. Maybe they have to
Hey, Jeff, what's going on?
log off and come back in. I would think that Jeffrey Devlin would have stepped in by now. Oh, then
Yeah,
maybe
it
they have
shows.
to, I think they're trying to come back on.
Can you hear me? Nope. Hold on. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. I don't feel like a Verizon commercial anymore. Okay, I'm just going to leave my Teams meeting right here so I can make sure we're all running at the same time. Good morning, committee members and board members. Thank you for your patience. Before you ask, we are planning on some level of people being able to be in the boardroom for next month for these committees in the board meeting. Hopefully we will not have to do that just because of technical issues. I would like to give you a brief update on our proposed changes to our fare structure. So we again at Port Authority often commingle these terms, fare policy and fare structure. One of our initiatives in the upcoming strategic plan is teasing these out. So we have the fare structure of what you pay when, and the fare policy of how easy is it to get to these fares, where should we set them, so on and so forth. The board will remember that in March and April, we brought a proposed change to the fare structure. This is the elimination of the $1 transfer fee. In lieu of the transfer, we would discontinue the 25-cent discount on Connect cards and then replace a single tap with a 3-hour pass at $2.75. Also introducing rolling passes, which are good for 7 days or 31 days, regardless of when they're initiated. And then any other changes to the fare structure would have been incorporated here, fare policy. So for instance, modifications to the UPass, so on and so forth, would be covered in subsequent updates. We'd also talked extensively that we realized that while we make these improvements for people who have passes, we still have about 8% of our patrons who are paying cash. And how can we make it easier for these cash payers to get to a fare media? So instead of $2.75 going into the fare box for one trip, they would be spending $2.75, and now they could get all the advantages of a 3-hour pass. So we had conducted our public comment from late March until the first week of May. We are nearly done with compiling all of our public comment. A point to note, for our FTA record tracking. We will submit a document that shows comment that was related to the fare changes. Yes, no, maybe so. And then a separate category for comments which came in through the meetings, which were not related specifically to the proposed changes to the fare structure. So recommendations on different route changes or placing a bus stop, or, obviously big conversations on introducing different types of fare programs. They're relevant to what we do, they're relevant to fares, but they are not specific comments on the 275 3-hour pass or the rolling passes. So we do separate them out. They will be tracked, but they don't get counted in the list of comments on this particular change. They're still there, they're just not on this particular change. We're in the process now of completing our Title VI analysis. Title VI is a portion of federal code that requires us to do homework for disparate impact for low-income populations and populations of color. And as we're resolving that, we don't have that finalized for today. So we will be coming back to you in June with that final analysis. We see nothing that shows a disparate impact on our proposed changes, but we want to make sure we have everything wrapped up. So we will be back to you in June at the Finance Committee for recommendations on modifications to the fare structure. Ideally for implementation, January 1st. It will take about 4 months from the time these changes are adopted for us to work with our vendor to get the ticket vending machines reprogrammed. So we don't want to commit to a date until we know that every TVM can have these new fare media up and available for people. And I am happy to take any questions on our proposed changes to our fare structure.
Thank you, Catherine. I don't think I have any questions today. Does anybody else from my committee have any questions?
This is Jen. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, great. Yes, thank you. No, I don't have any questions. Thank you very much for the presentation. And sorry you guys couldn't hear me, but maybe that was a good thing. Nice break from Jen talking.
Do we have any questions from the rest of the board?
Just a question on the public comment. In other words, I'm assuming that are you're going to set them up in a format that the board members can read, right? I mean, it's going to be condensed. Is that kind of what we're looking at, Catherine?
Correct. So you will receive a summary document that lists, X number of comments received, and then within the summary document, a spreadsheet that summarizes this. So initials of the person submitting or the entity submitting, and then, where they supported, was it yes or no for the fare change itself, and then a brief summary. And it may be as simple as supported, did not support. We will, of course, keep archived all the comments that we've received, all the letters which have come in, and those could be made available. We usually do not put all of that out there publicly. We'll put out the summary document. But if folks are interested, we can have all the comments made available too. But you will get a summary and then a brief description of what all the comments were.
Yeah, I was on 2 of the 3 calls, and so I heard some of the testimony directly, and so I'll be looking at that when we look at the summary also, because a number of us were on all 3 meetings, or public hearings. So thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Ann.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions from board members? Okay. All right. Thank you, Catherine.
All right. Thank you. Next up, we have our preliminary operating and capital budgets. Pete and I are actually sharing this, so I will go through to a certain point, and then we will trade over for Pete to finish the presentation.
Okay.
Again, so what you're seeing here, authorization. I'm sorry. I've got the agenda backward, don't I? We're going to the budget presentation next.
The slides are backwards.
The slides are backward. Hold on, please give us another minute for technical information. Yeah, this is right.
Remember that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we gotta switch over.
Let's just do the budget.
Yeah, let's do the
We
budget.
gotta switch over.
Let's do the big long one.
Yeah.
All right, okay, here we go. Now I'm back
All right.
again for our budget presentation. So the third slide, please. Fourth slide, actually. So we've been talking an awful lot about the uncertainty that COVID has generated for our budget, both from a funding perspective and for a ridership perspective. I want to stress our ridership will come back. It will not look like it did in February of 2020. The world that we knew on March 10th March 11th, March 12th, that doesn't exist for us. Again, what comes back will be different. We have already seen significant shifts, as we've discussed, in commuter patterns. We have seen in the past year, most of our universities have not been open. They're coming back in this fall. We've seen other shifts in school patterns. But another point to remember is all but one of our routes serve a medical facility or they serve a grocery store. So as we have seen nationally, that public transportation was the backbone for our cities during COVID. It's amplified here in Pittsburgh because we have such a long history of transit usage, and folks have been riding our service consistently. So we will see differences, but ridership will come back. So I know that we'll keep our eyes on our income coming up. We do have some slides to walk through our 3 iterations of COVID-related funding that we've received from the federal government to explain where that's getting invested so folks can see why. Again, ridership will come back, but our industry is anticipating 4 to 5 years. San Francisco Muni does not anticipate their rail to come back to pre-pandemic levels until 2031. We're not looking at that, but we have to get through this period to stability so we can make the best decisions about where we go in the future. Layered on top of this is the uncertainty for Act 89. Act 89 again provides $75 million a year for capital, to which we have a local match of $15 million. That act expires next summer, so the state is actively working on solutions to address that change in funding. Next slide, please. So our total operating budget is $54.8 million. The income is below budget. And again, with our COVID experience, this is not unusual. We have far fewer people riding. Drink tax is clearly impacted by this too, and our ridership is down. Service hours are 10% less than pre-pandemic, and I want to talk about that. We made changes last year based on where we saw ridership and where we did not. Now, this was not just adding a Saturday schedule. We ensured that every route's first and last trip were preserved so people could get to work and they could get home. So we put in sort of a hybrid schedule, but we have historically here at Port Authority not been able to cover all the service which we have out there. We do this, I don't say guessing game, that sounds really bad, but we know people will be on vacation. We know people will be sick. So we staff up a portion of our operators called an extra board. And historically, our extra board has not been enough to cover all of our service. And this is just how we've done it. In November, part of our schedule change, which again was our largest schedule change that was not related to a service reduction, we modified service so that those trips that were always not filled were removed from the schedule, and we massaged the interim trips. Our view is that the schedule that we present on our website or on a piece of paper is a contract to you. And if we know we can't meet it, we're breaking that contract. So our service hours are still down. We are working on hiring. We have always been working on hiring. It's historically been very difficult to get bus operators in. If someone is job hunting, by the time we identify them, they take a test, we interview them, we do a background check, we go through the whole shebang, and we do our drug tests. A chunk of the folks who are job hunting have already picked up another position, and a lot of folks don't make it through there. We are not unique. But again, if we know that we can't cover a trip, we need to massage that schedule so the service out there we can guarantee we'll get. As our hiring increases, because now we can put more people in a room with less social distancing, and as service moves around, you'll see these trips coming back up. Again, safety for employees and riders is our top priority, and clearly reliability, making sure that we're going to get out there what we say we're going to get. Next slide, please. Did I get that right, David? All right, good. Glad. So now you're seeing a budget reflecting our shifts from COVID back to our Port Authority initiatives. We are delighted that our county numbers are coming down. As county numbers go, so does Port Authority. So we are nearly a week, I think a week today, without any new COVID cases reported for everybody, knock on wood. It is time to get back to, we have made it through the pandemic. It's time to address our service to this new world we see around us and pick back up on some of these initiatives that were going full bore before March of last year. Next slide, please. We have been very fortunate that our state operating income has been flat, even though the state's seen fluctuations in the funding going to them. Preliminary budget exercises we did planned on 10% up to 20% reductions just so we could be flexible. And our capital funding is also stable. Our operating grant capitalization, we have changed due to a reduction of federal preventive maintenance. So much of the maintenance we do on rail and bus is can be capitalized, and we have shifted how we do those payments. Oh, lower energy prices, that's good. I'm glad that we will have our lower energy prices up until the pipeline breaks. Just kidding. We do not purchase diesel that comes in off the Colonial Pipeline, so our staff was very diligent in making sure that we wouldn't have any fuel disruptions. Tony, thank you to everyone who worked on that. Okay, next slide. Next slide. The next slide will break this down better, so just bear with me here. So what have we put our CARES and COVID funding towards? So we've had 3 iterations of funding. We had realistically the agency saving CARES funding that came through late March of 2020. We had our second iteration of COVID related funding in December, and then this year we have the American Rescue Plan. So let's talk about what we have used that money for. This is not magic money that rains down from Washington, D.C. We bill against it with unmet expenses. So you will not see things here showing that it's used to fill a gap on fares. It's invoicing what are acceptable expenses. Now, how do we decide what is acceptable? Clearly, we have pretty clear guidance that our operating expenses, which we could not meet because of fluctuations in revenue, are listed. And you see a list here. We work with our legal team. We work with our auditors to clarify if we have questions. The county staff has been gracious to work with our auditors as well. They're auditors. And we're in close contact with our friends with our FTA regional office in Philadelphia and FTA headquarters in DC. There may be different ideas from one region to another. So we see a lot of California properties have been able to accelerate fare programs they were already evaluating or implementing. We didn't have something in the pipe, but we go by our federal guidance. So point being, we don't make this up. Transit is a human capital intensive business. People drive our buses, people fix our buses, people keep our service running, people handle our customer service. So of the $109.5 million that we have invoiced in CARES funding, you see $80 million is personnel expenses. And I do want to stress again, we made the decision early last year that we would keep our people safe and we would err on the side of caution and allowing for quarantine time or time to be away or time for folks with pre-existing conditions to stay home safely. We did not want people worried about having to come to work sick. We didn't want passengers worried about getting sick from operators or vice versa. So we've invested in this category. Next slide, please. This breaks it down a little bit more for the other about 20% of our reimbursable expenses, which were more difficult to see on the previous slide. And again, you'll see them listed on further down. So PPE, nearly $2 million in personal protective equipment that we have covered for our staff. You see a bunch of pay categories because, again, we defaulted on making sure folks were not coming in if they felt ill or they had been exposed. Nearly $5.1 million in cleaning costs. So again, we were averaging $1 million a month last year additional in cleaning costs because we were sanitizing everything all the time. We have new CDC guidelines that this is much more airborne and we don't have to clean as extensively. So as we are moving back to whatever normal is going to look like, we will continue to sanitize until we make sure that we've got these air filtration units everywhere. We're testing out a bunch of them. But this is what we have done to make sure that our passengers and our staff are safe. Before I move to the next slide, are there any questions on the previous 2 slides? Yeah, I see shaking heads. All right, I will continue. So next slide. So the CARES Act. So you will hear people broadly say CARES funding. There have been 3 federal stimulus packages which we have received. The first was a CARES Act. Again, this was authorized, I want to say March 27th, 2020. And we cannot thank our congressional partners enough for making sure that this funding came down to transit. We have invoiced $109 million. We received under the CARES Act, and our next slides will show that, about $141 million. We offset the drink tax reduction because, again, if we are getting drink tax funding and people aren't going out, this is a major funding source for us. And then we had, again, a lot of the fare box loss, and we had additional expenses that went back in for elevating PPE, elevating sanitation. Other expenses, we completed a retrofit on all our buses to have a plexi shield that not only blocked a little bit of the interaction with patrons, but it encouraged people to stand a little further away. All of these things are rolled in here. Next slide, please. So operating deficit sources, let's walk through this, what this actually means. December 2020, when we spoke to you about what our budget looked like, we had only received the CARES funding. Had we only had the CARES funding at that point, we would be running through our reserves now. We would have come to you with significant service modifications in April and May of this year, and we would essentially be shutting the doors by fiscal 22 because there would be no money left in the bank. We can spend down our deferred revenues. We can spend that. There's a point at which we cannot completely empty out the bank because we have to have a certain amount of money in there. The federal government reimburses us. We must expend in advance. We have to make payroll. We have to have our reserves for a whole bunch of things. So let us be clear. The CARES Act, the first bill, would have gotten us through part of this year, and you would have seen an end of transit service in Allegheny County this calendar year. So next slide, just walking through again. What have we done with our federal stimulus funding? So this management team has decided we were keeping people safe and secure, and that the best thing we could do was maintain service on the street. People cannot, if someone has lost their job, if somebody is no longer able to stay in their housing situation, they need to know that we will be there for them at least 18 to 24 months, or else what's the point of getting into that new lease or getting to that new job? If you have returned to school and that hasn't materialized, you need to be able to make different decisions. The best thing we could do for this economy was be there and be reliable. Get people to the jobs they have today, get them to the obligations they have today. For parents whose daycares had closed and now they have to scramble to find different scenarios, they needed to know that we were there for them. We also wanted to make sure that we were not contributing to any kind of economic strain. We did not lay anyone off. Again, we could not have continued service if we did. And layoffs for us are not as simple as someone goes away and they come back. If an operator is off work for 30 days, they have to be retrained. We have to go back through a drug and alcohol screening. We're now paying our unemployment insurance, and then we're just shifting what we're paying somebody elsewhere. So we made these decisions as a management team to keep our staff safe and to preserve service and not go through layoffs. And I'm very proud that we've been able to keep all of our service out there because, again, that's our contract with Allegheny County. You see that listed here, other things that we focused our stimulus funding on. Again, this is a 4 to 5 year marathon. We're not in a sprint. We need to have the funding to get through this 4 to 5 year window and then be able to shift with what we see as a new reality. So again, the first iteration of funding at $141 million, we've already billed $109 million against you to highlight. Our second iteration, so I'm just saying December because I don't want to read that whole thing, it's another $143 million. That will get us through probably another year. So this is not money that is there forever. So our second and third rounds of federal stimulus, we've targeted out. Next slide, please. A few different scenarios. We have kept these scenarios simple. So what if ridership stayed like today? What if it went to 50% of pre-pandemic or 75% of pre-pandemic? Now, clearly, we don't expect our ridership just to be flat. We anticipate with the lifting of capacity limits in June, between the governor and our changing on our ridership, that we'll see more folks coming back. We anticipate in September when the colleges come back that we will see more ridership. We anticipate as work locations sort of stabilize in what they're doing, we'll see more ridership. But for ease of explaining this, we're showing you just current 50 and 75%. Next slide, please. So if nothing changes and what we have today is a ridership that you see through the future, here's your snapshot. So starting this summer, all of the CARES funding is exhausted. From there, we switch over to ARPA. Now, ARPA is the American Rescue Plan that got passed this year. Why would we use that instead of the green December money? The ARPA money has a threshold on it. It times out. We have to spend it first. The December money we have longer to get to. So if our ridership does not change here at all within 2 years, and what that will look like on paper is closer to about 18 months with schedules, all of our federal funding is exhausted, and then we start going through our reserves. And remember, our reserves, we cannot completely spend down, though for here we're projecting it. And by 2025, we have no money in the bank and we cannot make service. Realistically, we would be looking at service modifications ahead of time. But again, this reflects the 4 to 5 years time frame that we're looking at for service to stabilize. Next slide. Same thing, we're looking at what does this scenario look like if we get to 50% of our ridership. Can I see the next slide, please? And we don't think this is unreasonable. We anticipate being above this, but we have to play into the world that we know. Same thing. There's a window that we hit in 2026 where we have no money. And I would say our stress point would actually pops up between 24 and 25 before we start drawing down on all of those reserves. What complicates this is, of course, as we're going in through this, we have contracts with wage guarantees incorporated in there. Electric bills get more expensive, benefits costs gets more expensive. Our cost of doing construction, we're no more special than any other entity. So with lumber going up by a fourfold factor, concrete is twice as expensive as it was last year. The needed improvements that we have to make for our community also become more expensive. So it's not a matter of us being able to keep things flat. We couldn't if we wanted to, and the intent of this funding is to make sure we can continue to provide good service back to our community. Next slide, please. 75% recovery would get us to about 150,000 trips a day on bus and about 18,000 trips a day on rail. We still hit our pressure point about 4 years out. So again, it's a 4 to 5 year plan for us to be able to use this money to stabilize the important work which we're doing in our community. The intent on these funding iterations is not to fire people or to delay these needed improvements that we've made. So you see our budgets continue to reflect adding staff, growing in our new initiatives. This is money to get us through this interregnum until we see what the world is stabilizing as. What's compounding this also is our state funding. We know Act 89 is going to change, but Act 89 was never our long-term plan. Act 89 was always a 10-year placeholder. Our commitment was we would save enough money to make it through those 10 years, but we come back, our budget and our expenses have gone up. Status quo is not even something that we can live with. And to grow with our county and our region, what we need to do, we have to be having these conversations about what this budget looks like. Next slide. So in short, we rounded out last year with deferred revenues of about 132 million. That's money in the bank. Again, comparing this against about a $470 million operating budget, this is about a 4-month operating reserve. We use this reserve, it's undifferentiated, so this includes a workers' comp reserve, it includes risk reserve, it includes everything that we set money aside for. And again, if we had we would be dipping into these reserves and they would essentially be gone now if we hadn't received CARES funding. Next slide, please. All right, I will turn it over to Mr. Schenk now. Unless there's any questions, let's clarify before we move on. Do we have any questions on our 3 iterations of our COVID funding and how our management team has chosen to invest these reserve service and take care of our people? Okay, I see no questions. Thank you. I will turn it over to Peter.
Good morning, and thank you, Catherine. So I will go over some of the details that are included in the preliminary 22 budget. As we've stressed before, that transit is a people-intensive business. So as in previous years, you'll see that a large proportion, almost 75%, goes to salary and wages and pension. And about 50 million of the $494 million preliminary budget goes to materials and supplies, which would be the majority of the budget, about $28 million for access, and then you can see for purchase service, utilities, and other expenses are smaller amounts. Next slide, please. Where does the money come from? You will see that there's a little bit of a switch versus prior years, and that we will be using a greater share of federal funding, as Catherine just alluded to, from both CARES and ARPA funding. Continue to have the state as a large benefactor at $243 million. And then our friends at Allegheny County at $33.8 million. We're anticipating money from the Regional Asset District at about $2.8 million. And our capitalization level at about $54.5 million. Next slide, please. So for the preliminary revenues for fiscal 22, as we mentioned earlier, that in order to make federal invoicing of the CARES and ARPA money easier and to identify the financial impact of COVID on the Port Authority, we are budgeting the revenues at close to pre-pandemic levels. The only changes of significance would be about $1 million less to reflect the change in the fare change, and about $400,000 less for shared ride reimbursement towards the Access program. Also, an additional change would be a reduction in interest income due to lower market interest rates. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, highlights on the total revenues, about $1 million less due to the fare change. We currently have the UPass budget at $1.25 per tap. We are in active negotiations with our current UPass partners. Our actual passenger revenue is about $3 million less through COVID. Our Access revenue budgeted at pre-pandemic levels. Advertising revenues are also just slightly below pre-pandemic levels, and as I mentioned, interest income rather significant reduction due to the interest rates. Next slide, please. Passenger revenues, and I will add April in here for our June meeting, but our April and March levels have been pretty static, although they have been up from our February levels. But here you can see the sharp reduction in passenger revenue from February of 2020, which was right before the pandemic, and we are hoping that we will see a rebound in these numbers in the fall, specifically when the schools and universities return to the full status. Next slide, please. When you look at the expenses and the year-over-year budget to budget, you will see about a $10 million increase in wages and salaries. That is attributable to any contractual increases and increased headcount. Our pension and employee benefits are going down about $10.4 million. That is due to some reductions in the retiree retiree healthcare expense. You can see materials and supplies up about 4.4, purchase services 2.4 related to some COVID purchases, and other expenses $2.2 million higher. So when you look at a gross expense level, $494.2 million for fiscal 22 versus $485.6 million, which is about a 1.77% year-over-year increase. Next slide, please. Some of the highlights from an expense perspective in the fiscal 22, we do have the 32 additional staff to fulfill some goals that are pre-pandemic goals that we're going to restart now that we're back almost to full service. We do have the ATU rate increase of 2.75. We have a merit pool for non-union personnel of 3%. We also have the second round of salary equalization, which included in the fiscal 22 budget. Our pension expense is budgeted at $3.2 million less than the projected fiscal 21 actual, and that is due to a rebound in the stock market returns that directly impact the pension expense for the Port Authority. Our active health care is locked in and will be unchanged until December of 2022. And the active healthcare also assumes a filling of about 130 additional jobs from current staffing. We do currently have a significant number of vacancies as well. From a materials and supplies perspective, we are budgeted at $51.9 million, which is $4.5 million higher than the fiscal 21 budget. We have been able to, Tony's group has been able to lock in about 60% of our fuel for fiscal 2022 at $2.06 per gallon. And we're anticipating a usage of a little over 7 million gallons, which would revert back to our pre-pandemic levels. We did use less fuel in this current fiscal year due to COVID-19. Materials budget $840,000 higher due to the driver shield extensions. We also have an increase in supplies due to purchases of COVID supplies, which we continue to put into inventory. We have a reconditioned units program, which is related to our LRV vehicles, and that's increasing by about $1.5 million. And tires and tubes, also an increase of about $400,000 due to the additional mileage back to fiscal 19 levels. Next slide, please. In the categories of purchase services and miscellaneous expense, we have an increase of in work done by outside contractors of $2.4 million. That's made up of there's $1.2 million for a HASTIS upgrade, which is the operator scheduling system. We have $700,000 in additional funding for the long range plan. The Schein-Bachman fare policy change, which Catherine alluded to, the work that they would start at the end of June, is $300,000. There's $250,000 for the LRV design costs, as well as strategic planning at $200,000, and a year one of a TRID study for $175,000. Next slide, please. When you look at the subsidy level, we are unchanged from both the state and county perspective, and we would be, if you look at right in the middle there, you see the operating surplus deficit in 21. We were projecting about a $42.7 million deficit. The 22 has a $56.5 million deficit. And that would be restored using the CARES and the ARPA funding. Next slide, please. So that's just to reiterate the point is the state operating income level is unchanged. The Allegheny County match of 15% would obviously be unchanged because of the static nature of the state operating income. RAD is slightly down, but only $150,000. And our capitalizations are decreasing as we are shifting some of the preventive maintenance dollars from fiscal 21 and fiscal 22 to be used for a anticipated large bus purchase in fiscal 23. From a headcount perspective, you can see as we speak that it's a total personnel increase of 32, 27 of those in the non-union ranks. And then we have 2 in IBW, 3 in ATU salary, 1 additional police officer, and then a reduction of 1 in maintenance, which actually was a movement from a position in hourly maintenance into ATU salary. Next slide, please. This just gives you a little historical information in terms of our active headcount, and it's actually only up 0.72% from March of 21. And when you look at this information from the average from fiscal 2018, so from 21 to 18, only a 0.72% increase. Pension expense, we are anticipating that there will be a increase in pension expense beginning in fiscal 24, but the way it works with the actuarial smoothing of losses is that the 2008 market decline, those losses are smoothed from an actuarial basis over a 15-year period. So in 2025, you begin to see that the losses from the 2008 market correction fall off of the actuarial requirements for the authority's pension expense. So you will see that that's the driver of the reduction in fiscal 2025. We've also added, since our board retreat, there was a question about the unfunded pension liability, which was not included on the slide last month. So that is the line above the bar chart. So you will see that the unfunded liability, which currently is in the $250 million range by 2025, would fall to about 125 million. Now, this is obviously assuming that there's no other market corrections between now and 2025, and that the two plans would earn their anticipated returns, which for consolidated plan is about 7.25%, and for the ATU plan is currently at 7.75%. Next slide, please. Unlinked passenger trips. This just shows you the past quarters since the pandemic, and on a quarterly basis, the reduction in ridership, which we have talked about earlier and even last month at meetings that we've had previous. Next slide. Revenue vehicle miles for 22. The message here is that we're anticipating that the mileage will rebound from about 26.8 million miles to 32.8 million miles. Next slide. From a gross operating perspective, budget over budget, we're going from the $485.6 million to $492.2, which is about a 1.5% increase. And just to recap the impact of COVID on our current fiscal year, next slide, please. That the revenues are projected to be about $66.5 million less than budget, and $48.8 million of that is due to a reduction in passenger revenues. Also, the interest income is about $1.2 million due to lower interest rate returns than when the budget was initially put together. On a positive note, gross expenses projected to be about 24.9, and I think at the in the next month and a half that that number will be exceeded at 24.9 since we do continue to run under budget from an expense perspective. Without CARES funding, the operating deficit would have been about $113.5 million. And I apologize for the small type on this. We've tried to work it so that it's a little bit more readable, but this just reiterates what I went over in terms of total revenue, about $66.5 million under the budgeted level, which were the pre-pandemic amounts. And towards the bottom, you would see that the $113.5 million operating deficit, absent any CARES funding for fiscal 21. Next slide. Now we will, are there any questions on the operating budget?
No.
Hearing none, well, oh, I'm sorry.
No, I just said I don't have any questions.
Okay. We can move on to the capital budget. So for 22, we are anticipating continued turnpike payments to PennDOT, and the amount in state funding for the capital budget, $113.51 million, which is about $200,000 reduction, which is minimal from the fiscal 21 budget. That includes the funding that we receive to support our debt service, facility improvements, fixed guideway improvements, support for BRT, and also a significant support for items in the operating budget through capitalizations. There are no scheduled bus purchases in fiscal 22. As I mentioned, there's going to be a significant planned bus purchase in fiscal 23. As you can see, it was 107, it's anticipated about 107 buses in 23. So from both a source perspective, you can see that the federal funding will be about $119.8 million. The state will contribute 104.1, and Allegheny County $3.8 million to make up the $227.8 million capital budget. 18.6 of that will go towards debt service. And just a reminder that last year that number was close to $22 million. And thanks to our refinancing that Mike Cetrin and David Huppiker participated in actively, and also Ed Typansky, we were able to reduce that by almost $3 million a year. Our fixed guideway improvements, $147.5 million. Facility improvements, almost $60 million. And then some support programs of $6.7 million, which takes that total capital program to $227.8 million. Next slide, please. And very much like the operating budget, the state is our largest benefactor, about $104.1 million of that $227 million capital budget. Uses, you'll see the debt service, support programs, facilities. This is just a pie chart of the items that I just went over. So I won't spend, it just gives a percentage breakdown. And as I mentioned, the debt service at $18.6 million, and that debt service predominantly goes to pay for rail improvement projects that were made, the stage two rail improvement projects. For our 22 bridge and tunnel improvements of $5.1 million, I won't go over all these, but you can see the Kenmar Bridge, bridge preventive maintenance, the CBD tunnel emergency egress and access programs are all part and parcel of that $5.1 million for bridge and tunnel improvements. Here's just some of the items that are included in the bus and rail improvements: CBD plinth, Route 88 grade crossings, rail grinding, South Busway paving construction make up the $24.7 million. Our BRT we have in at $117.723 million. I think I mentioned that at last month's meeting that we're including now the full contribution of the federal government in that $117.7 million, and that we in prior budgets did not have that included in our BRT authorized expense levels. Next slide. For park and ride improvements, you see we have a space availability program that Mr. Devlin and his folks are working on. We also have a Castle Shannon pavement project and a Carnegie Park and Ride expansion design project to make up to $2.6 million. In terms of rail and bus facilities, of the $52.3 million, and I won't go over all these, but we have the Ross lighting upgrades, underground storage tank replacements, Velasco station construction, and a South Hills Village car house paint booth replacement. Next slide. Non-revenue vehicles and shop equipment. Manchester parts washer, and a bus and LRV air and surface purification devices, which Catherine had talked about earlier for to install on all of our vehicles. Other support programs, CCTV and security upgrades, and ballistic vest for the police. Any questions either on the capital section or the operating section?
I don't have any questions. I just want to thank you all for putting this together in such a complicated year, and you've been preparing us all the way along. So I should have questions, but I just feel like you've done a great job of apprising us of all of this. So I'm good. Any other committee members with questions?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Yep. Any other board members with questions?
I just want to say thank you. This was really concise and in great detail. So I thank you and I appreciate the information.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Pete. All right. Our next agenda item is a proposed resolution, authorization for designated staff to file and modify grant applications, agreements, and other documents and files in the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation dot grant system. Pete?
Yes, every 5 years, the authority is required to get board authorization that enumerates various positions within the Port Authority that is allowed to submit either applications or invoices to PennDOT. And PennDOT has a dot grant system. So this resolution, including the exhibits, detail the positions within the resolution that we would submit to PennDOT, authorizing the various positions within Port Authority that would be permitted to submit both the applications, whether capital or operating, and then also invoices, whether operating or capital. So this is resolute. I request your consideration of this resolution.
Okay, great. Any questions of committee members? Any questions of other board members? Do I have a motion to forward this for the board's consideration next Friday?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, and our final agenda item are the April 2021 financial statements. Pete.
All right, thank you very much. From a total income, expense, and subsidy income, very similar to the March, we were about $5.1 million below income due to the pandemic. Our total passenger revenue was about 2.78 million, which was consistent with March totals. Our total operating income for the fiscal year is 54.8 million below budget, with every revenue category below budget. Total expense for the month of April was $963,000 under budget, and that's despite a $2.8 million retroactive payment for the HEU wage settlement. Total expense for the fiscal year is $35.6 million under budget. And if this trend continues, I would anticipate that we wouldn't have to use any of the deferred revenue that was used to balance the fiscal 21 budget. Total subsidy for the month was $1.9 million over budget. We did invoice $15.5 million for the CARES funding during the month of April. Our total subsidy for the fiscal year is $7.8 million over budget, but I would expect that to normalize over the final 2 months of the fiscal year, and we should be on budget in terms of subsidies. For our year-over-year results, total operating income is $48 million below last fiscal year due to the pandemic. Our total operating income for the month was higher in fiscal 21 than 20 due to higher passenger revenue. Our expenses year over year, $8.1 million higher this year due to higher wages and salaries, benefits, purchase services, and also other expenses. Our subsidies are $45.5 million higher. At this time last year, we had not begun to invoice any CARES funding. In fact, it wasn't even available yet. So that's why the sharp increase in total subsidies year over year. If you look at our operating reserves, we started the month of April with $142.4 million in operating reserves. We received $38.6 million in cash inflows from passenger revenues and other subsidies. We had outflows of $37.6 million for employee wages, benefits, and various services. So we ended the month of April with $143.4 million in operating reserves. Any questions?
I'm good. Do I have any questions from the committee? Any questions from other board members? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you very much for your time.
And that was our final agenda item. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. We're adjourned and we'll see you next month. Thank you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Smianek, and this is the Performance Oversight Committee. So if you just take a second here and gather your agendas, we will continue, and I will start with roll call. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Our committee members, I'm not sure who is here this morning. Representative Davis, are you available this morning?
He's not here this morning, Michelle.
Thank you. And Representative Musgorski, are you here this morning?
Good morning, Michelle. I'm here. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Lori. And any other board members, if you could just state your name if you are still in attendance or have just joined us, please.
Jeff Lightworth.
Ann O'Gorick.
Jessica Walsaville.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. First item of business that we have this morning will be the approval of our minutes of the April 15th, 2021 meeting of Performance Oversight. Do I have any changes or additions or corrections to anyone's knowledge on those? Hearing none, then I would ask for a motion to approve these minutes.
Michelle, this is Lori. So moved.
Okay, and do I have a second? I'm going to go ahead and second that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions or declines on that? Okay, hearing none. All right, great. Then we're moving into agenda item number 3 with our proposed resolutions this morning. Good morning, Mr. Trona. I see you up there ready to go and your slides are ready. So good morning and thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, board members, committee members. I have 7 items for your review and presentation to the full board for approval. The first being off-site record storage services. We received 2 bids for this service over a 5-year period. The low bidder did not meet our qualifications and therefore ineligible for award. Recommendation that the contract be awarded to the low responsive bidder. Access in an estimated amount of $289,178.26 over a 5-year period. This price represents an 8% increase from the previous contract price for this 5 years ago. Number 2 is bus batteries wet type. 4 firms accepted our invitation, 3 bids were received. For these types of batteries over a 2-year period, our recommendation is that the contract be awarded to the low responsive bidder, East Penn Manufacturing, estimated amount of $167,352 over a 2-year period. This was a 2% increase from our contract 2 years ago. Number 3 is truck and upfit. This is off of our state schedule. Pennsylvania Department of General Services had a schedule where we wish to award and purchase these trucks for municipal work vehicles and emergency responder supplies. These contracts are in effective at least through June 30th of 2020. And we wish to purchase a total of 9 trucks and related upfit kits for each under the terms and conditions of their respective contracts. These trucks will replace the units of which are at least 10 years old and beyond their useful life. As printed in your report, our total spend is $312,220.70. The uplift kits are merely like the police accessory, the lights and so forth that would go on the vehicle. And the uplift kits for the maintenance vehicles would be plows, etc., those types of things. So if there's no question, I won't go through the entire detail of the list. Number 4 is Fastener Supply Service. We received 1 bid for this service over a 3-year period. Our recommendation is that the contract be awarded to the low bidder, which was Thomas Fastener System, estimated amount of $276,062.82. This price represents the same pricing for the previous contracted price for these products 3 years ago. What's unique about this contract is the vendor managed inventory, nuts, bolts, washers, those types of things. Number 5, air, oil, coolant transmission, and fuel filters. 9 firms accepted our invitation, 7 bids were received for these filters over a 2-year period. One of the low bidders inserted their own terms and conditions, contrary to the bid documents, therefore ineligible for award. Another low bidder did not meet the technical requirements and is also ineligible for award. It's our recommendation that the contract be awarded to the low responsive bidders. Vehicle maintenance, 7 items, an estimated amount of $431,753.20. Cummins, estimated amount of $341,226. Penn Diesel, estimated amount of $40,113. CBM USA, $21,660. Total award $834,752.20. This price represents a 15% increase from the previous prices we received 2 years ago. The low bidders that were ineligible for award, the price difference between what we awarded and their price on the first one was a difference of $3,000 on an $82,000 award item. And Penn Power Group filter difference of $16,000 on an award of $157,000. Number 6 is wheel flange lubricator sticks for the LRV. 6 firms accepted our invitation. 5 bids were received for these sticks over a 2-year period. So our recommendation is that the contract be awarded to LB Foster Technologies, estimated amount of $175,000 over a 2-year period. This price represents a 38% decrease in prices that we received 3 years ago. Number 7 are wheeled power kits for the LRV. 3 firms accepted our invitation, 3 bids were received. For these tire kits over a 3-year period, it's our recommendation that we award the contract to CAF USA, estimated amount of $1,052,457.60 over a 3-year period. This price represents a 9% increase from the previous contract 4 years ago. Madam Chair, that concludes my report. If there's any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Trona. I have no questions for you. Any other committee members have any questions for Mr. Trona?
Good morning, Mr. Trona. Actually, I'm very pleased to see that one of the contracts is decreased and one stays the same. Do you know why they were able to drop the price for the wheel flange lubrication sticks?
Yes, I do have some information on that. When we asked the question of the market change in the price, we understand that we have more competition on this contract than we've had in the past. And LB Foster explained to me that their price decrease was mainly on process improvements that they were able to put in place over the past year. The second price was still lower than our price that we had from several years ago. So the market has taken a decline under this particular manufactured product.
Well, that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Trona. Thank you, Lori. Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Trona on any of these items? If not, I would request a motion that we approve this resolution and move it forward to the full board on Friday. Lori? Could I have a motion?
So moved. Yes, so moved.
Thank you. And Jessica, could I get a second? Jessica, I can hear you. I'm going to go ahead and second that. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you, Jess. Any opposed? Great. Motion carries moving forward. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Trona. Item B on our agenda this morning is authorization to establish 5th-year budget with Transdev Services Incorporated. Mr. David Huffaker. Good morning. How are you doing, Mr. Huffaker?
Good morning, Madam Chair. I'm doing very well. I am David Huffaker. I'm the Chief Development Officer. And we've got a transaction before you today. That's the 5th year of our contract with Transdev for their administrative budget. For some background, I'm going to turn it over to Darcy Cleaver, who is our section manager of transit amenities. She's still there.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Good morning, board members and committee members. I'm Darcy Cleaver, as David indicated, section manager of transit amenities. I'm here to present and seek authorization for our last and final year of our existing contract with Transdev for the Access Paratransit administrative budget. As indicated, this contract was established in 2017 to provide our professional services to coordinate paratransit services. It is a 5-year contract with an administrative budget that is negotiated, reviewed, and adjusted through an amendment each year. This is the 5th year of the current 5-year contract, which requires our 4th-year amendment. The proposed budget of $2,710,000 represents a slight decrease of less than 1% from last year. Given the uncertainties of the coming year, the fiscal 22 budget aimed to maintain the same staffing and support levels as the last fiscal year. The overall budgeted staff levels are still the same. However, one staff position was shifted from Transdev payroll to the subcontractor payroll to match the staffing levels of 2021 and also ensure that Transdev is still able to meet their required DBE goals. They did experience some layoffs last year, so they're just doing a little bit of shifting with the staffing positions. This also doesn't necessarily mean that the subcontractor is cheaper, but it does mean that the subcontractor is charging and we are paying the actual amount as opposed to TransDev, who charges a higher overhead provisional rate that is adjusted at the end of the year. So the slight reduction, which was mostly offset by cost of living, increases in the areas of the budget involving salary and benefits, as well as the annual contractual increase for the office lease on Smithfield Street. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions that anybody may have.
Thank you, Darcy, for that explanation. Anyone have any questions for Darcy on this issue? Okay, hearing none. I would like to have a motion so that we can move this forward to the full board, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Representative. And do I have a second from Ann?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Great, thank you. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thanks, Darcy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Moving forward to item C on our agenda, authorization to enter into a permanent easement agreement for Mount Washington Tunnel Hillside Stabilization Project. And this will be with Mike Cetra and Eric Bilski this morning. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, board members. This is Eric Bilski, Director of Capital Programs. I'm going to give you a little background. In January of 2020, along the South Busway and Light Rail line at the south end of the Mount Washington Transit Tunnel, we experienced a landslide event due to stormwater runoff from Paul Street. At that time, we had our contractor remove the slide material and backfill with stone. That was a temporary condition. The picture in the bottom left shows the slide right before all the material came down. And then the larger picture on the right shows the temporary stone. After that event, the city and PWSA completed Paul Street storm drainage repairs, which helped alleviate the source of the water coming over the hill. Since that time, we've completed a permanent stabilization solution using a soil nail system. Next slide. On the left side, you can see the proposed solution here would be to use a soil nail system. The dotted line pictorially shows a failure plane, which would be the unstable area that, even though we put a stone backfill, that provided enough stability for a short term. There's still a long-term presence of risk. And the soil nails are used to anchor the slope in order to ensure that we don't have a much larger landslide or failure in the future. The picture on the right shows one of the drill rigs that we've used in the past. This was along the East Busway, used to drill soil nail anchors into the slope. And that generally will be the type of equipment used, though might be slightly different because of the access and the restrictions we have here at the south end of the tunnel. But I wanted to give you an illustration of what that might look like. We're still working with the ancillary contractor to finalize the details of when they're going to start the work, but we anticipate that we would start this work this summer. I'm going to turn it over to Mike Cetra to present a resolution that would permit this activity due to an easement that's needed with a property owner. Mike.
Thank you, Eric. Good morning, Madam Committee Chairwoman and committee members. This resolution, as Mr. Bilski mentioned, would authorize Port Authority to enter into a permanent easement agreement with 288 Paul Street LLC. As Mr. Bilski explained, Port Authority has experienced issues with mudslides and stormwater runoff that has caused disruptions at the south portal of our Mount Washington Tunnel, which connects both buses and our light rail system between Station Square and South Hills Junction. So it's certainly a critical connection. In order to address these issues on a more permanent basis, and as Mr. Bilski explained, we are planning a hillside stabilization project that will utilize soil nails, soil stabilization mesh, and other materials to help prevent further mudslides and flooding on the hillside on a long-term basis. In order to complete the project, maintain it on a permanent basis, Port Authority does require temporary construction and permanent maintenance access to the neighboring portion of the hillside, which is owned by 288 Paul Street LLC. The property owner has agreed to enter into this agreement with Port Authority to provide the access and permission. The resolution would authorize Port Authority to enter into the agreement with 288 Paul Street LLC in a form approved by Authority Legal Counsel. And subject to any member questions, I respectfully request that the committee recommend this resolution to the full board for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sutter. Do I have any board members with questions for Mike at this point? Okay, hearing no questions or comments for Mike. Lori, could I have a motion to move this forward to the full board?
Yes, so moved.
Mr. Letwin, could I have a second, please?
Sure, seconded.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Great, motion carries, moving forward to the full board. So thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Moving forward to item D, authorization to award construction contract for Mccandless Park and Ride Site Improvements Project. Coming back with Mr. Eric Bilski. Thank you for the previous slides. That made it very clear with that stabilization and work. So I appreciate that. And I see we have more slides. So thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. We're moving on with the authorization to award construction contract for the Mccandless Township Park and Ride Rehabilitation Project. This site has been used for quite some time for Port Authority patron parking. And a few years ago, the Port Authority purchased the land from prior owner that operated the Rave Cinema movie theater. And this is up off McKnight Road and Blazer Drive in Mccandless Township. The project would expand the customer parking in excess of 400 spaces. It would provide operator relief facility and site amenities. In doing so, it would improve the bus circulation and offer an operator layover loop. And I wanted to show the diagram at the bottom just to illustrate the bus movements here, which shown in blue would be a bus that could wait and then on a layover and then come back around without actually having to go onto the local street. They could make the maneuver, and then the red shows the bus would, depart the site. So those improvements are significant for operator efficiency and just providing the time relief that we need for the bus routes. Also, we're replacing bus shelters along with enhanced ADA parking. You can see just below that operator bus loop, you'll see symbols with ADA parking and crosswalks, a few bus shelters there with basically very much improved access way for ADA parking to get to the transit shelter. For the project, we'll have stormwater management, green space and landscaping, new pavement throughout, line painting, and new LED site lighting. Project would take approximately 9 months to complete. The lowest responsive bidder was Mern and Mern, and we received 7 bids for the project. Following any questions, I respectfully request approval of this resolution to award construction contract PNR-21-04 with Mern and Mern Inc. in the amount of $3,320,341, subject to completing pre-award requirements, and also to enter into any necessary agreements with the Township of Mccandless, which may be required in order to maintain the improvements.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Bilski. Any board members have questions on this item?
Michelle, I do. This is Jen.
Go ahead.
Michelle,
Yes,
this is Jen. I do have a question if that's okay.
sure, absolutely. Go ahead.
I just wanted a little bit of clarity. I'm very pleased that there's stormwater management and green space in the landscaping. So is this going to be considered along the lines of like a green parking lot? Because very much interested in making sure that when we're doing lots and stuff like this, and I imagine there may be some requirements out in the township, but that we're making sure that, we're not just putting down asphalt, that we're actually making sure that the water has time to seep back into the ground and not contribute to any of the bad stormwater management issues we have downhill. So I just wanted a little elaboration on that, if that's okay, Chairwoman.
Absolutely. Could you hear the
Yeah.
question and comment? Thank you.
Yes, to address that question, thank you. The zoning requirements and township requirements do require underground stormwater retention and management systems, which we will construct, as well as they require a certain percentage of green space on the site. So we'll have, for example, the end caps, so the parking areas will have green, whether it's shrubs or grass planted. We'll have grass planting strips, we'll have trees along the perimeter. All of this is in the design plans and construction plans.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, do I have a motion to move this forward? I can't remember. Somebody help me. Did we already, I got lost in the motion. Did we approve this resolution to move forward yet?
Not yet.
No.
Thank you for that. Okay, Lori, can I have a motion, Lori, to move this forward, please?
Yes, so moved.
Thank you. And I'm going to second that motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Do I have any opposed? Okay, hearing none. Motion carries. Thank you for that clarification and that assistance I needed with that. All right, moving on with item E, and we're continuing with Eric Bilski, authorization to award construction contracts for East Liberty and Manchester equipment improvements project. So thank you.
Thank you. The authorization to award this contract for the improvements at East Liberty and Manchester would provide replacement of vehicle exhaust systems at East Liberty Garage, one of our 4 operating facilities. As well, would provide at our Manchester main overhaul shop replacement of vehicle exhaust systems, shop HVAC equipment, lubrication reels, and overhead hoists and controls. The picture to the left shows a set of reels with the lubricating system and the compressed air system hanging from the ceiling that the bus mechanics use in their work areas. The pictures on the right show the bus exhaust systems that hang down. They get connected to the bus exhaust flute at the end of the bus that connects to it. And then the top right picture shows the exhaust on the roof where it's extracted. The existing equipment ranges between 30 and 50 years old that we're replacing on this project. The duration of the project is 10 months. And we received 2 bids for the general contract, 5 bids for the mechanical, 2 bids for the plumbing. and 4 bids for the electrical on a 4-prime contract. Following any questions, I respectfully request approval of this resolution and award 4 construction contracts as follows. Contract SYS 21-06G General Construction with Mercedes Construction Company in the amount of $900,630. Contract SYS-21-06H Mechanical Construction with Legalia Mechanical Inc. in the amount of $2,223,000. Contract SYS-21-06P Plumbing Construction with First American Industries Incorporated in the amount of $312,000. And contract SYS-21-06E Electrical Construction with Westmoreland Electric Services LLC in the amount of $493,600, all subject to completing pre-award requirements.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Bilski. Do I have any questions from any of the board members? Hearing no questions, Lori, could I have a motion to move this forward, please, to the board?
Yes, so moved.
I'm going to second that motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Bilski,
you.
for your slides and information this morning. Thank you, everyone. That concludes our agenda this morning, and so I would just ask for a motion to adjourn performance oversight.
So moved.
Thank you. We're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Right, it's my term. This is Jen Liptak. We're on the technology committee. Get everyone a chance. I believe the slides are up on the presentation. I'd first like to start with a roll call. Representative Mogorski. Are you still here? Okay, it's just me and you and every other board member, so thank you all for coming. Our first item on the agenda is the approval of the April 15th, 2021 committee meeting minutes. Lori, may I have a motion?
So moved.
And I'll second that. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, we're going to move on to our next item. We have one item of business today on the agenda, which is a bid. So Tony, are you going to do this one on the Cisco switch?
I am, thank you.
Just doing with
I
that.
have one item.
There's a little bit left, right? What are we going to do with that?
Hey, John, you need to mute yourself.
Thank you. I have one item for your review and presentation to the full board for approval. It's the Cisco switch for rail transit operations. We're actually going to go back to our general services contract through CoStars. They have a contract for network equipment and related services to E+ Technologies, and the authority wishes to make a purchase under the same terms and conditions as the state did. This contract is effective at least through December 31 of 2021. And the authority wishes to purchase installation and configuration and assistance as necessary of 95 Cisco 9300 series switches. So a recommendation that we award this contract under the same terms and conditions as Pennsylvania Department of General Services, networking equipment and related services to E+ in the amount of $897,408.82. Thank you very much, Mr. Devlin.
That completes that bid. I didn't know if you wanted to
Yeah.
get an approval on that before I move forward.
Sure. Thank you, Tony, and thank you, obviously, Jeff. Yeah, I'll do a motion. Obviously, those switches are very important. I'm glad you guys are in the process of continuing to upgrade and make sure the system is running smoothly. Lori, may I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
And I will second that. All those in favor saying aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Then I'll move forward. So now I believe Jeff is going to move forward and kind of go into more details about this upgrade. So Jeff, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I appreciate it. I thought this would be a good opportunity to share a little bit about this network switch upgrade. We've been really itchy to get this going. Before I share my remarks, I want to give a shout out to Adam Vogini, who joined our team at the end of last year as Director of Technology Infrastructure. So he's been really critical in helping us make sure that this gets structured in the way we need. Also to Pete Griffith and Ted Weed, who actually work on the networks day to day. So this particular network switch upgrade, it's interesting over the years. It used to be this was a black box for folks of this whole network thing. And I find over the years, as we have Comcast and Verizon in our homes, we tend to know a little bit more and more about how networks work. Obviously, this one's a little bit bigger than what we have in our personal homes. So what we have is some legacy equipment. It's reaching our end of service life. It's really no longer supported. And these particular 95 switches are going to be installed at the South Hills Village Operations Control Center along the rail lines. And also some are going to be upgrading in Manchester and the Hines locations. We really need them not only because they're reaching end of service, but we have increasing connections. The amount of Wi-Fi that's being added, our security cameras, future needs, et cetera, are really growing exponentially across our whole system here. They also, a really big deal for us is they give us a really significant improvement in our ability to monitor the network, to make sure it's running at the speed it should be running, what's the health of it, keep everything's rolling. So often when technology works nicely, we don't even notice it. When it doesn't, we definitely notice it. So this is a really big deal for our team to have that network monitoring feature that's being added on. And then obviously we're always looking at what do we need to do to upgrade our cybersecurity features. And these network switches bring some more of those aspects to light for us. So just to give you a little bit of an overview of kind of things that are on our network. Obviously, you know, we have the internet that we're connected to and what's called a router. And then these switches are placed all along the different areas so that our ticket vending machines, our digital signs, our HVAC and control systems, security cameras, our desktop PCs, et cetera, can all be connected through these switches, ultimately through the router and then to the internet. There's a few more components here. This is what I find to be probably the most simplistic explanation of what components are put on a network. So just to give you a quick view of what our network looks like here is we have a fiber ring that runs along 7 or 8 of our core locations. We have an offsite data center with an internet connection, has our firewall and our server farms. As I mentioned, these particular switches are going to go in the South Hills Village, the OCC Center, along the rail lines, Hines and Manchester. So you can see we still have a few other locations on there we'll be bringing to you over time to get those upgraded also. This is kind of this year's wave of getting the network upgraded. So thank you. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Okay, any questions from our board members?
No, I don't have any.
Thank you, Lori. And any others board members have any questions? No, seeing none. Thank you, Jeff. I think it was very helpful to just give a little bit more detail about the purchase we're going to be making. And again, thank you for your work in helping to support the entire system and make us more technologically advanced. If there's no further business for today's meeting, I'd like to motion for adjournment.
So moved.
And I'll second that. So we're going to adjourn the meeting, and I believe that ends our committee meetings for the day. So I'd like to thank everyone on behalf of Chairman Letwin and all the chairs for participating today, and have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jen. Bye.